everyone. Welcome to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. I'm glad to be back here recording new episodes for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy what we got cooked up for you. Interesting topics to discuss. Tonight, we're going to be joined by my guest, Jon. Jon is a paranormal investigator. He's kind of the head of a paranormal group for his school that he teaches at. So I'm sure he's got some interesting things to talk about. Before we bring Jon on, we're going to do a little bit of shout out here to everyone that's been following with Tinfoil Tales. I've took a little bit of time off, but I am back and I'm glad to be able to start this up again. So with my time off, I've been doing some other things with another podcast, and that's been a pretty time consuming, but take a little bit of time from that now to start this Tinfoil Tales up again. The last few months, there's been a lot of good traction going on with the episodes, good positivity. So I definitely appreciate that. Podcast is growing pretty good. If you're out there listening, thank you for that. If you want to be on Tinfoil Tales, you can send me an email at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com and we'll get you scheduled on a future episode. That's if you've got something you'd like to talk about, something to share. You can go ahead and like and subscribe. Do whatever you got to do to help get the word out. It's definitely appreciated. This podcast is still small time, but it's got a steady following, so I do appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and bring Jon on in, so hang tight, and we'll be back in a second. I'd like to take the time to welcome my guest to the show tonight. Jon, thanks for coming out and talking with me.
Hey man, thanks for letting me come on here and share my spooky stories with you and your audience. I've been doing a deep dive on Tinfoil Tales, and I'm really excited to be on here.
I'm definitely excited to have you back. You're the first guest I've interviewed in the last 5 months. I took a little hiatus working on a different podcast, but glad to get this one back up and rolling again.
I'm excited to see it. Hopefully you keep cranking out more stuff so I can share it everywhere with all my friends and make them listen to my voice even more on here.
Well, if all goes as planned, this one will be actually coming out next week. So
Awesome.
my plan is to go back to my weekly release schedule. So every Tuesday morning, there'll be a brand new episode out there.
That's awesome. I'm excited. So do you just want me to start from the beginning and we go from there?
Well, if you want to start from the beginning, if you want to give some details of kind of about your background or anything that you do or whatever, it's up to you. It's your time to shine. I'm just here.
Okay. Well, I'll give a little introduction so people don't think I'm just a crazy crackpot on a paranormal podcast, because that seems to be the norm nowadays. My name's Jon. I promise I'm not crazy. I'm a teacher. I run the paranormal club at my school. That was an effort to get kids to read. I like all kinds of spooky stuff. People come up to me in the town I work in and tell me about aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever, all the time, because they know me as the ghost guy. I don't know if that's a good title or not. And all of this started for me wanting to be into the paranormal when I was a little kid. It's kind of sad, I guess. My grandma passed away when I was 2 or 3, and there's a very spooky story involved with her passing away that I was just told the entire time I was growing up. And it just led to me going down this pathway of being into the paranormal and all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Um,
Um,
I was going to ask something I kind of spaced
okay.
it. Um, how many, trying to figure out how to word this correctly. You said you do it with the school and you get kids to read and everything. How many times have you actually had anyone come up to you and like asked more in-depth stuff before we get into the story? Like, how would you describe what you do to like the average listener out here? Like, how would you explain the paranormal to someone that's of a younger age, I guess, without trying to scare the crap out of them?
So basically, what I did originally, I'm the social studies teacher, so I can talk about a little bit of weird stuff. You know, if I'm talking about the Civil War, I can introduce a ghost story, something like that. So it wasn't like I went out of my way to create the paranormal club at my school, but it was, it was just an option on the table, and I decided to go for it. So what we did in this club, every other Friday, just about, we'd have a 30-minute to about an hour long meeting, depending on our schedule for the day of school. So what we did for the first few meetings, we had a day that was dedicated to this is what a ghost is apparently to researchers. These are different types of ghosts and hauntings, and here's a few famous cases, and we would break it down. It's the same way I would break down, this is what this colony did during the Revolutionary War in class. Like I tried to make it as digestible, and here's the facts according to the quote unquote experts as possible. And they seemed really receptive to that. Explaining what an alien is. A lot of the kids were arguing, oh, it's just a little green man. But by the end of that day, we all came to the conclusion that alien isn't a little green man as you think it is in pop culture. It could be any living creature that's not from our planet, some sort of extraterrestrial, not of Earth. And the idea that there could be different things out in space made a lot of these kids go and check out books and come up to me the next week and be like, hey, look, I read this. Have you heard of Barney and Betty Hill? Which I thought that was a little advanced for some of the kids to get into, especially the books, but they read these pretty thick books from the library about this stuff, and were able to regurgitate the information, and like seemed really into it. Um, I don't know. I try to make it as kid friendly as possible, but also while keeping a little bit of mystery, so they go out and look into stuff on their own and have other hobbies besides being hood rats.
I think it's awesome. It's a great idea. It gets the kids involved and looking into things, piques their interest. I was just with having my own kids and everything else, like when you mentioned being a teacher and you talked about that, I'm thinking like there's no way like our school would be okay with something like I can't see them doing that, and I can't see other schools around here like maybe I'm just out of touch with it. Maybe they would be. I don't know. I haven't heard any other schools around here really talking about stuff like that. So it really piqued my interest that your school was cool enough to allow you to do that with the kids.
So I think how I got away with it, if you want to put it like that, I work at a very low income school. And because of that, a lot of the kids have issues with the law. It's to the point that the city that I teach in had to put in multiple curfews over the past few years. Like even if you're a school age person who is not at school during the day, they're gonna take you in to wherever and make sure you get where you're supposed to be. Um, it's also a town that struggles with drug use and all kinds of other things. So my argument was these kids are behind on the reading skills because of COVID. They're behind in socialization. And would you rather have them running the streets, possibly getting involved with people who do drugs, or would you rather have them dancing around a cemetery trying to talk to ghosts? Pick
Yeah.
your poison there. So I would rather have a bunch of little weirdos who want to talk about ghosts than a bunch of kids that are putting stuff in their bodies that probably don't need to be there.
I
And
I
for
completely agree.
yeah, for some reason the school was very receptive to it. Um, it ended up being this past year it was the biggest club in the history of my school. The school's been there since about the 1800s, and there was over 100 and something kids in this club. So I guess I'm doing something right. I
I'll
got
say you're
invited to
doing
come
something
in.
good.
Yeah, they invited me for the after prom celebration to make sure that there's no prom night babies brewing after that. And they had me take the kids on a ghost hunt throughout our school because there's a bunch of urban legends about that school, and we we got some weird results, man. Like I didn't expect to find anything. We messed around with a spirit box. We got some responses, EMF detectors. But we had another teacher that didn't believe in anything at all try the Estes method. And the response we were getting made us just shut it down. It got too real and too creepy too quick.
What is the Estes method? I'm not familiar with it, and I don't know if the audience is either.
So the Estes method, it's a it's a form of communication with something on the other side that was made by Carl Pfeiffer and Connor Randall at the Stanley Hotel. They were the resident paranormal investigators, and it's named after Estes Park, Colorado, where they were at. Essentially, what happens is one person, they act as some sort of antenna for the paranormal. So what they did and what we did in the not as flashy, not on TV version is you need noise canceling headphones. So we got those from the band director, and we put that on the teacher. And we went to the art room, and she had like some sort of blackout eye mask that they were using for projects, like just a normal sleep mask. So we got that and put that on the same teacher. We connected the noise canceling headphones to a spirit box, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a box that scans radio stations and it goes through all the frequencies, and they believe that spirits can manipulate it and talk through it. One of the issues that those paranormal investigators realized, and what I realized by taking a group of kids on a ghost hunt, is that if you hear anything come through that spirit box, there's going to be a bunch of debate on what you heard. So it could say something like, hello, and then you're going to have two kids throwing hands across the room that it said, I like Jello. Like, people hear different things.
Mm-hmm.
So this gets rid of that possibility. The person who is wearing the eye mask and the headphones, they're the only person hearing what's coming through the spirit box. And because they have noise canceling headphones and that spirit box is turned up all the way, they can't hear what questions are being asked. So while you're while you're asking questions and it's going through all these stations, that person's just saying what they hear. So the story of our school is that there was a little girl who fell down the staircase that's right by my classroom, and she passed away. We didn't think it was true, and a lot of the responses we got were like the word push, or we got some female name, and I can't remember the name right now to save my life, because right now I'm sweating because I'm fat and talking too much. But I can't remember the name to save my life. But we got a name, we got push, we got staircase, like a bunch of words that kind of fit the folklore or the urban legend. Well, I ended up going and looking up the name. I went to our local town library. I pulled up a bunch of death records, and I finally found that name. The last name to it was, a family name, like an important family name in the town I teach in. But it was a little girl who passed away in that town in the correct time period that this urban legend would have came from. But it doesn't say anything about how she passed away. It just said that she tragically passed away, yada yada yada. It's an old obituary. So what we're going to try to do this year in the club, and if we go on another investigation, is to see if we can get that name or more information said about that person out of the spirit box. I'm not going to tell any of the other students who were not there for the after prom ghost hunt, which most of those kids graduated this year, about it. And then we're going to see what we can capture and go do more research and see if we can iron out any details of this urban legend for our school.
Hell yeah. Sounds like a fun time.
It it's fun. It's not fun when 15, 20 kids get freaked out and start screaming and run out of a room. But other than that, I think it's a good experience for them. They get to do something that's not necessarily dangerous, but they feel on edge, and it's in a contained environment. There's no risk of them getting hurt, at least I hope. I don't know. It seems fun. The kids enjoy it, and maybe my background's in history, so hopefully we can pull out the history to back up what they're getting on the spirit box.
At the end of the day, they're learning something. They're not doing anything that's bad. They could be doing a lot worse. So I applaud you for spending the time and effort into trying to help kids these days to find something better to do rather than do the bad stuff that they don't need to be doing.
I appreciate that. That was my whole argument to get this club started. Um, but I guess if I'm going to tell you some spooky stories, I'll go all the way back to the very beginning. The story I was told growing up that it wasn't until a few years ago I realized I was actually there for, but I was a baby, so I probably wasn't even completely sentient yet. Um, have you heard a lot of folklore or ghost stories about the lady in white?
I have heard some stuff, but I'm not very. I read things. It's not that I don't retain it, but I've read so many things. So I know there's like stories of the lady in white. Usually it's like the ones that I remember. Isn't she someone that's usually been killed or something? And or she there's something with I think with a lady by a lake. She's usually in white.
Yeah,
She tries to like bring people into the water or something. Wants them to come out and help her or something. I don't know.
yeah. There's a few stories like that. Um, and I guess my story would kind of fall into that mythos a little bit. So in Brazil, the lady in white is known as the drama branca, and then in Japan, if you get into their weird folklore, the lady in white is known as the Uri. So no matter what culture you're really looking into these ladies in white, even if you go to the Native American culture, like you mentioned with the lady in the lake, they're all seen as harbingers of death. They are foretelling some sort of tragedy. And my family has a lady in white story that even right now, I'm not even going into detail. I have goosebumps going up my arms. So, my great great grandmother was a full blooded Blackfoot Native American. Her family descended from one of the tribes in the Blackfoot Confederacy up in, I think it's North Dakota. And her family eventually settled in Harlan, Kentucky. If you're not familiar with that, that's the site of Bloody Harlan or the Harlan County War, where basically all the miners tried to kill all the mine owners because of wages. So it's a site that's really charged with some negative energy. Um, so while they lived there, my great great grandmother, still practiced the same Native American traditions that she grew up with. And I've been told that she was very spiritual. So she would believe and act the same way. She didn't care about what other people thought about her. And one of the things that she had told people, and they just kind of brushed her off as being a crazy old woman, was that she would be a spirit guide for our family when it was our time to cross over to the other side. So she would tell people she'll come 3 days in a row. And this is apparently a thing in many Native American cultures. I talked to, I cannot remember the tribe, whatever Chief Cornstalk's people over in West Virginia are, whatever tribe that is. I talked to somebody who descended from that tribe, and they told a similar story. But either way, the spirit guide will come back 3 days in a row. The first two are a warning: you're about to pass away, get your stuff together, make your final arrangements. And on the third day, the spirit guide will take you to whatever is on the other side of the veil. And that was a story that was passed down through my family. Well, my grandmother was born in my hometown in Kentucky, and she, I guess the rest of my family converted to Christianity. She didn't beat to the same drum. She was very spiritual. She picked up the same practices that my great great grandmother would do. She'd read books about it and, still try to keep that memory alive and try to stay true to her roots, or what she believed her roots were. Unfortunately, when I was really young, she developed terminal cancer, and this story is from her very last days. So, to set the scene, they knew she didn't have long to live, and there's not really anything they could do for her. So they put her in hospice care, where the nurses would come to your house. You'd have all the equipment there, and they would take care of you while you're at home. So 3 days before she passed away, at about 9 p.m., there was a knock at her door. My uncle answered the door, and there's nobody there. My mom and her brothers had multiple friends that lived in the same neighborhood as them, and they thought somebody was playing a prank on them. So they shut the door, they moved on. The next night, there was a knock at the door. They answered it, and when they opened the door, and this is according to my great grandmother, she felt like the wind cut through her and came into the house. This might be a shock, but there was nobody at the door that day either. The night my grandmother died was an especially long day for my mom. So at the time, she was going to college, she was student teaching, and she was working at Walmart. So she was doing basically 3 full-time jobs and then taking care of me. So this day, she student taught and then worked at Walmart, and then she had night class. So my mom had just gotten out of her night class, and she was headed home. It was about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, according to her. And as she was driving on these really winding back roads in southeastern Kentucky, the road suddenly became really thick with fog. So my mom and I have driven in a similar fog to this, and she's told me that this is, the same type of fog. And I can vouch for what she said. The fog where she said it resembled that night, you can't even see like the lines on the road in front of you. It's so thick. So she's driving, she's taking every corner slow. And as she rounds a corner that's about 2 miles from my grandmother's house, she suddenly sees what she thinks is a person standing in the fog. She only got a quick look because it was as she was rounding the corner. She slammed on her brakes to avoid hitting this person, put her head down, was bracing that she was going to go to jail for vehicular manslaughter. And when she looks up, she doesn't see a woman collapsed on the hood of her car. She doesn't see anybody. So she looked outside the car, looked around, didn't see anybody, just thought maybe she was tired. She regained her composure, and she drove on. I don't know how far away from my grandmother's house this next part is, but before she pulled in, there's a few curves. She rounded another tight curve, and she saw the same figure in the fog. She again thought, I'm tired, whatever. I'm not going to slow down. As this person is coming up to her in the road, she's driving toward it. The person becomes more and more real. So she slams on her brakes and looks up. In front of her in the fog, she said that she saw an olive-skinned Native American woman with long black hair just standing in the middle of the road. She said this woman was wearing a long white dress and didn't seem to react to the fact that she was almost hit by a vehicle seconds beforehand. So my mom stares at this woman as she slowly just dissipates into the fog and disappears from view. She was shook up, but decided that she was most likely going crazy and just continued home because it was only 100, 200 yards to my grandmother's house. She gets inside, and before she can even tell anybody what happened, she walks into complete chaos. So the whatever machine my grandmother was hooked up to, she was hooked up to a ton of them. They were all going off. Um, Basically, she was actively dying at that point. My great grandmother and my great grandfather were in the room. My uncles had me upstairs with them. Again, I was a baby. I don't remember any of this. And the hospice nurse was there doing everything she could. And suddenly, during all of this chaos, there's a knock at the fucking door. According to everybody that was there, my great grandfather told everybody to ignore it, and they went back to trying to deal with my grandma because they kept getting ding dong ditched. It's almost as if he pissed off whatever knocked at the door by saying that, because both the front door and the back door, which were both locked and chained, swung open with so much force that the doors got stuck into the drywall by the doorknobs. So when that happened, everyone kind of froze, and they said the temperature in the house went down about 15, 20 degrees to the point that they could see their breath. And then that was the point when my grandmother flatlined. As if on cue, after the flatline, all the cold air left the room and just left a grieving family behind. And every person I've talked to in my family that was there that night, I've, I have recordings of my great grandpa who's passed away saying it, my uncle who's passed away saying it. And the only other person that was there that night that I don't have a recording of them telling me the story is my great grandma, but she's kind of losing it right now. So might not be the best time to interview her on this experience.
Yeah.
But that's the spooky story I grew up with. Almost every time we had a campfire or something, this would be the story that they would share to, new friends and everything like that. And they'd all get freaked out.
Kind of makes you start questioning things. Like if everyone's telling you this story from a young age, you kind of already have that openness to it. I think even with younger kids, though, too, I think they're more susceptible to seeing things more than what we are as we get older.
Yeah. Like growing up with this, my after this event, my mom went down a ghost hunting rabbit hole. She'd watch, ghost hunters, she'd buy all the books and everything like that. So, it's almost kind of gives you a predisposition to being open to the paranormal,
Mm-hmm.
which I always kind of called bullshit on the story until I don't know, I'm basically giving you the Marvel end credit scene of this story. So, about 10 years ago, my mom had just gotten a printer with a scanner, and she decided she was going to digitize all of our family's photos so everyone could have a copy. We were scanning an album of photos that we had never seen before. They were from some great, great, great aunt that lived on the other side of the country. And we're going through photos, scanning them. My mom picks up an old black and white photo and like hits the ground crying. So once she calms down, she's able to speak with us. She's holding this photo and she's like, "That's the woman I saw in the fog." And written on the back, very faded ink, is the name of my great great grandmother, the same one who said that she would come be a spirit guide. And that's like the only surviving picture anyone in our family had ever seen of her. So that made me believe it even more.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
hate
think,
telling that story. I get goosebumps every
yeah,
time.
just sitting there thinking about it kind of, it doesn't give me goosebumps, but it makes me start thinking like, again, not to call bullshit on anything you said, because I 100% believe what you're telling me, but I always try and keep a level headed, like a skeptic's point of view. So I'm trying to like think, well, you said the doors blew open, hit the drywall. This, like in my mind, I'm like, how would this? I'm looking for like explanations, and I can't really rationalize anything like that. Same thing with like with the photo and everything else. Like, I don't know. It gets my
Yeah, that
that's why I love hearing stuff like this. It gets me thinking, and it's just like that's not to be a disprover, but I'm always trying to like, well, is there something else that it could be? And then when there's nothing else that you can think of, I'm like, well, must be must be real.
no 100%. I no matter what it is, I always try to think of ways to debunk it, which the haunted movie theater stories that I can tell you here in a second, we went through, me and a few friends that work there, and tried to debunk some of this stuff as much as we could. So I understand it. Like it, I wish I could have gone back to that house and messed around with those doors and seen if there's a way I could make them open,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing if there's a change in air pressure, see if that would make them fly open. Like I'm a person that's not satisfied with any of this spooky stuff until I see a full body apparition in front of me, until I see the ghost of a person or a Sasquatch or a lizard person in front of me. There's still going to be doubt in my mind, and I'm going to try to either disprove it, and if I can't disprove it, then there's something weird there that we need to look into.
Yeah,
So
that's
I completely understand it.
that's how I go. Like even with the stuff I've encountered over the years on my own, it's just like I always try and find explanations. I actually just said this. I think I've said on another episode before, but I said this to someone today that I was talking to about actually setting up an interview with too. I look for not so much to disprove or debunk, but like kind of we just said, like rationalize things in my own mind. And I went out with a paranormal group. It's probably been 13 or so years ago now, but everything to them was paranormal. And it really rubbed me the wrong way because just because you feel something, you thought your shirt got tugged on, or you feel a cold spot. First of all, we're out in the middle of the woods. So we were at like this location that's like around this area. It's like supposedly really haunted or this and that. And oh, do you hear that? You mean the birds screeching in the distance? Like, I don't know. I don't, it just rubbed me the wrong way because everything was paranormal, paranormal, paranormal. I was like, there's literally so many different things that all of what's happening could seriously be. Like, you could have just, oh, you felt something touch your shoulders. Probably the spider that just dropped out of the tree. Like,
That doesn't matter. They want to go get as much evidence as possible, and then they're going to present it to somebody and not give them any other context besides, hey, here's the sound we caught in the woods, or here we got a cold feeling. We're not going to tell you that we ended up next to water and we didn't know it.
yeah,
A lot
we're
of
by a
these
creek.
people just want evidence, and they don't want to rationalize it or put it into any context at all. They just want their portfolio to get bigger.
I actually camped
I,
out at this place before. And like I said, everyone around here, even my parents had heard about it years ago being a haunted place. And they used to do satanic rituals out there or some other bullshit story. And me and a buddy went out there and camped one night. And we were right out of high school. So it's been over 20 years ago at this point. And we had paintball guns. And yeah, we were camping by a fire. We hear some random noises coming down along the creek area. So he takes up the paintball gun and just starts blasting it into the weeds. I was like, I guess we're shooting the ghost. I don't know. And next thing we know, we start hearing meh, 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 meh. So the only encounter we had that night was apparently a duck coming up to visit us, and he
that
shot at it with a paintball gun, not realizing what it was coming at us.
was a ghost duck.
Yeah, we didn't
Well,
see the duck, so it could have been a ghost, I guess.
if you were a ghost hunter, that would have been the ghost of a mallard coming back because it
Hmm.
has regrets in life and can't move on.
Yeah. I've been out there before. I've hiked through there. I've never felt anything. I've been to another location. They claim it's super, super haunted. Didn't feel anything. Didn't notice anything. Of course, every little creak they hear in an old building was haunting. So I was like, or it's the place settling. Like,
I mean, I live 15 minutes from the portal to hell, Bobby Mackey's Music World.
I want to
All of
go
these
there.
all these ghost hunters go in there. That is the end all be all, and everything's paranormal. I have seen more drunk people just pass out in the bathroom there than I think anything supernatural. But it's the people who go there. It's your intention.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going there and you want something paranormal to happen to you, when you walk in, there's a big sign as soon as you walk in that says that they're not liable if you're attacked by a spirit. Bobby Mackey is not liable because he was sued and he lost that court case. There's janitors I work with, and they have stories of going to the bathroom and they're accosted by a spirit, and a trash can flies across the room and hits them. But they went in with the intention of, I want to see something paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in there twice. I don't drink, so I didn't really fit in a bar, but I've been in there twice, and both times was to be like, what's everybody talking about? Nothing weird happened to me, but there's a man in Cincinnati. His name is Dan Smith. He does the haunted Cincinnati ghost tours. He's written a few books that I have on the bookshelf behind me, and he refuses to go back to Bobby Mackey's. He was on the Cincy Shirts podcast, which is a business that makes T-shirts relevant to Cincinnati, and they had a podcast. It's kind of defunct at this point, but he said that he would be there, and he's logged more time there than any other paranormal investigator. And if he went in and he wanted to talk to Johanna, the ghost that haunts it, he would get responses from Johanna. If he went in and he asked, "Hey, is Darth Vader here?" they would get responses from something identifying as Darth Vader. Um, you can look up that podcast episode. He gets into it, but it's your intentions when you get there. So if you're a ghost hunter, you go out into the woods. It doesn't matter if it's a spider or a nudist colony that you run into. You're going to find some way to attribute it to the paranormal.
Yeah. And that's where I come from, or just from my point of view of it, I guess, is the TV shows, and then everyone wanting to imitate the TV shows, and everything's got to be this, and they want to have the glory and the fame, and this and that. Like, I call bullshit on a lot of it.
Yeah, and you have to capture something every episode, or you don't get renewed for a new season. So that kind of encourages that behavior.
Maybe that's why I'm doing podcasting, because they can't cancel me, I guess, because I don't have anyone to answer to but myself.
Hey, that works. That's what I'm trying to do. It's just not working out.
Don't give up.
I'll
Like
I'll cross my fingers and wish real hard.
I said, it takes at least a good 6 months of churning out content before you start noticing any differences. But if you want to dive on into your other stories with this haunted movie theater, I'd definitely want to hear about it.
Okay, so the haunted movie theater is my go-to thing whenever people ask me about, you know, why did I create the paranormal club at my school, or why am I interested in any of this, or why am I having the students read a ghost story when we're supposed to be talking about the battles of Gettysburg? I feel like you can learn history through ghost stories, or it's just a fun thing to talk about. Which, working at a movie theater, you see all kinds of films, you see all kinds of spooky stuff, but the few people that worked there for quite a while when I worked there, they had a bunch of crazy stories, which were more terrifying than any other movie I've ever seen. Take the scariest Conjuring movie. Some of these stories made me want to quit my job that day. So it was fun. So basically, this movie theater, it wasn't the biggest, but it was the best and cleanest theater in about 3 different counties in southeastern Kentucky. So the other theaters were all kind of run down. They weren't taken care of. You sat down in your seat and you'd instantly get bed bugs. So I think that's probably the scariest thing at those theaters. So I started there when I was in high school. I switched jobs mainly because they had Magic the Gathering tournaments among employees, and I really wanted to win some Magic cards. But when you start any new job, especially when you're in high school, there's some hazing and some inside jokes. So when I started working there, everyone told me that the theater was haunted. And the few people that knew me from high school knew I was into some spooky stuff. Like I wasn't sacrificing virgins on the weekend or anything like that, but you'd catch me reading Ghost Across Kentucky by Linwood Health, I think. He was a professor at Western Kentucky University that sadly passed away. But I'd be reading spooky stories. So they started telling me that the place was haunted, and basically I was trying to establish that I was cool and I wasn't going to get freaked out. I told them I needed proof because I wasn't going to, buy into their stories. And I think that was a mistake. I think that opened me up for some things. Um, the assistant manager who ended up being my friend basically told me to shut up and pulled me into the office, shut the door, and told me not to tell anybody in the town what he was going to show me. He said the owners would be upset because it's bad for business because this movie theater, and I've never heard of another thing like this. This movie theater was also occasionally a church. They would have service in like the main theater sometimes, not all the time. It was a very strange arrangement, and having a church inside a haunted movie theater was not the best thing when you live in a very heavily Christian town. So he queued up a few clips, vowed me to secrecy, and hit play. There's two big screens on the wall across from his desk. Um, and the first video I saw after he clicked play was a night vision shot of the projection area, which that's the upstairs area that hosts all the projectors and everything like that. So this camera was focused on the door to the projection area, and there was also servers kind of surrounding the sides where the movies would be uploaded. On either side of this, there were some pretty dark hallways, going the length of the theater. And in the clip, you see the projectionist walk into frame. He's going down the far hallway from where the camera's positioned, and you see him flip on a light above one of the projectors, and he's doing the daily checks. He's making sure the movie's queued up, the projector's turned on, everything's running smooth, the bulb doesn't need replaced. You can see him in the video because of this light. Now, from the location he came from, so from the dark part up into the lit up middle headed toward him, there's a just completely black shadow figure, and it crosses the same area and goes down the hallway toward him. I'd say it was about the same size as him, just average 5'10", 6 foot tall person, but it was pure black. Nothing else happened in that clip, so it ended right after that. The other clip I was shown was of the same management office that I was in. So they had cameras pointed toward the desk. I think they were kind of above it, pointed toward it, for when the concessions people would count out their money at the end of the night, make sure nobody's stealing. So the owner of the theater is sitting at one of these desks. She'd come in occasionally, and she was talking to a manager that would have been at the other desk, but he wasn't in her frame. So she's talking, and above her is this giant wire rack. And because of this video, we went in, we measured it. So it was even, I don't think anything would slip off of it. But above her, is this wire rack, and there's like a few CDs up there, or they were probably DVDs, and then the remote for the two TVs that were watching these security camera clips on. So in the video, she's talking unaware. This remote lifts up off of the shelf about a foot or a foot and a half, and then it glides just in front of the shelf and just drops to the ground. The clip went on just long enough for her to turn and look at the thing, and it ended after that. There's a few more little short videos of like, look at this poster case open, or look at this door open. I kind of attributed that to the poster cases being from the early 2000s, and this was 2016, 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. So, they're a little bit older and they've been used all the time. So, of course, there could have been some issues. But those were the two videos that kind of stood out from my introduction to the weird stuff. Um, and I guess seeing that I only had one and a half real personal experiences, I can start with mine. I'll tell you a few of the other spooky things that happened there. Um,
Sure.
the first thing that happened to me, it's not exciting. I went in to check the live action Jungle Book movie. It was right after I started, and it didn't sell. So no one bought tickets for it, and they were trying to see if they could turn off the projector and, preserve the bulb for 2 hours and not have to use it during the show. I walk into the theater, and you're kind of on the lookout for three T's. If people are in there, you don't want people talking during the movie, people texting during the movie, or people inappropriately touching during the movie. So I walk in, there shouldn't be anybody in there, but I hear the stadium style seats really quickly raise up. It's got like a thump sound, when they go up real quick. I was about halfway up the ramp before I could see any of the seats in the theater when I heard that noise. So I get to the bottom where I can look up and see the whole theater. And if somebody were to leave, they'd have to go by me. And I didn't see anybody in there. I called the lead usher of that day, who was a 6'7", 16-year-old with a beard. He kind of looked like the mountain off of Game of Thrones. Puberty did him right. And he came in there because he thought people were trying to sneak in or they're doing something inappropriate, and he liked kicking people out. And we didn't see anybody in there. We looked around. That was the first thing that happened to me. It's not that exciting, but I figured I'd add it in. So my real story starts when they hired a new manager. So his first night closing, I was what was called the late usher, which meant I had to stay until the very last movie let out to make sure nobody was doing anything inappropriate in the theaters. Typically, there were no issues. So we wouldn't really check the theaters, and we'd hang out in the office and talk about random things. So typically at the end of the night, I'd go and assist with turning off the projectors and everything with the night manager, because that place is real spooky to be alone. It's a big, dark area. You have the projectors making noises. It's always hot up there. It's just got a weird vibe. And the other thing is, somebody between the time the theater opened and I worked there had like carved pentagrams into the wood. Don't know if that had anything to do with it or they were just being funny, but those were up there. So after the last customer had left this night, the assistant manager who was closing that night, the new manager who's being trained, and me, I was we were the only people left in the building. I'm having a stroke trying to say this. But we were the only three people left. The assistant manager and I had spent about the last 2 hours telling the new manager all the spooky stories and supernatural happenings that all the employees had reported, or just the stories they had shared. And he wouldn't even consider the possibility of ghosts being real. He said that, ghosts are the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning. They're just hallucinations, or you're all crazy. He was coming up with 1,000 excuses, wouldn't consider that there was anything weird going on. So we're walking up the really dark staircase to the projection area. We're already kind of in like a freaky mood because we've been talking about ghosts. And he tells us, the new manager tells us, that he is going to prove to us that the theater isn't haunted. So we walk into this projection area, and the projectors are loud. Like they're louder than you would expect them to be. He completely drowns out the loud humming of these projectors with the most profanity infused rant I've ever heard in my life about how ghosts aren't real, and if they were, they would show themselves to him. They'd come up and scratch him or hit him. He was doing everything he could to provoke whatever entity was there. This rant continued for like the 10-15 minutes it took for us to turn off all 12 projectors. So we're walking toward the door, and he very smugly announced to the empty projection area, "See, nothing's there." And I feel like he provoked something, in my opinion. So I'm the last one out the door. I have my hand on the heavy metal door, just to make sure it closes all the way. When something pretty powerful hits this door from the inside of the projection area that we had just left, there's a giant boom, and the door is slammed into me with enough force that I fall into the assistant manager, who then falls into the new manager, who almost fell down this giant concrete staircase that led to the projection area. Like, if the assistant manager wasn't able to recover and kind of grab him, he would have tumbled, and he was a pretty small dude, so I feel like he would have got hurt pretty bad, and could have possibly died if he hit his head, because it was, 40 steps on the staircase, Jesus. Fairly high. So we recovered. They kind of looked at me like, what did you do? And then I was like, that wasn't me. And both of them kind of got wide eyes and were like, let's get out of here. So we all run down the stairs. We stayed in the building just long enough to set the alarm. I know one of the managers left his computer in the office because at that point he was trying to be a YouTube gamer, and he would edit stuff on his breaks. He just completely left that, and we dipped. we left. We didn't even say anything in the parking lot. We just went home. So the next day I woke up to a phone call from that assistant manager, and he asked if I could come in and work the morning shift instead of closing again. And he said if I came in early, I wouldn't have to work at night for, another week. And based on what happened, I didn't want to do that. So as soon as I walk in the theater, the new manager and the assistant manager are there, and they call me into the office. They have pulled up on the two TVs in there the security camera footage from last night. So one of the cameras is the one that's pointed at the door from the inside the projection area, the same one that they caught the shadow figure on. And the other one is outside. You see the staircase, but mainly you see the door so they can record who's going in and out. So they hit play, and both the clips start to play at the same time. We see the exit of the projection area. We see that my hand is loosely on the door, so there's no way I could have slammed it. When all of a sudden we see it slam into me, and the new manager basically almost dies, almost falls down the stairs. There was nothing in either one of these videos that shows something hit the door. There's no movement, no orbs, nothing. It just door slam into me. We almost fall downstairs. So because of that, we would forego previews, which if you work at a movie theater, typically Wednesday night, you get the keys to the movie, the movies that come out on Friday. So somebody has to watch that whole movie to make sure it runs properly. So what we would do is we would just invite all the employees. Hey, if you want to see this movie, you go watch it. And typically there'd be like one or two that nobody wanted to watch. That would be the ones the managers would watch, but it would make sure that everyone saw the movies, make sure they ran correctly. So we would go to those things and not watch the movies. We'd be upstairs trying to see if we can make this door slam again. We would open a fire escape and try to slam the door. We did a bunch of random things. We even got one of the employees who was training to be in the Arnold Classic, which is a bodybuilding competition, to slam the door into me and see if it would knock me down. And not even he could produce enough force to knock 3 guys down. So we don't know what that was. And that's probably the spookiest thing that's ever happened to me. So that's my only good story. We tried everything we could to debunk it, and never could get any answers. So if you have any ideas, I'm all ears, unless you just want me to go ahead with a few of the other stories I collected.
I don't really have any way of debunking that. It just sounds like if there was something there, he intimidated enough to try and give him a good old going away present, I guess, and knock him down the stairs.
I guess, man. We had a guy that worked there. His dad was a priest, and we told him what happened. We're like, hey, listen, there's a demon. Like, we didn't know what to say. We're like, there's a demon upstairs, and we explained the whole story. And he said that um, the theater was basically a battery, that so many people come in there all the time, and they have so many emotions from these movies that something's feeding off of it, and it had built up enough power to basically prove its point to that new manager. That was not the answer we wanted. We were hoping that he'd come in and like bless the theater. Didn't do that. But that was the one answer we did get. It wasn't through any of our experiments or anything like that, and we didn't have ghost hunting equipment. If I had the stuff I have now for the paranormal club, I could have probably found out a few more things. Um, but some of these other stories are creepy too. One of them even drove the person who experienced it to be a preacher now. So if a ghost makes you impacts your life enough that you change career paths, something happened, in my opinion. So this happened to a friend of mine, and it was a day that our theater hosted a school group. So typically, when that happens, there's one manager and about 3 or 4 employees that come in that morning because schools are taking kids on field trips. You come in, make the little popcorns, little drinks, and then you just hang out until they leave and you go clean the theater. So, also, when that happens, I need to say the manager will go up that morning, turn on the one projector that needs to turn on, and then leave, and they won't go back upstairs until the projectionist comes in that day. So this person who ended up becoming a preacher, he's cleaning this theater. It's the largest theater in the building. It's the same one they have church service in. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. He's cleaning it, and it's around noon. The first shows didn't start until 1:45, 2 o'clock. So as he's sweeping, he looks up at the projection window, and he sees our projectionist. He waves at him. Our projectionist waves back, and this guy who's cleaning the theater finishes cleaning about the 3 to 4 feet he had left. The other employees had already left the theater, a few seconds before him because they'd finished their row. So as he's walking out the theater, the ramps to movie theaters are a little bit long, but not horrifically long. It took him maybe 15 seconds. As he walks out the theater, he sees our projectionist standing in the middle of the lobby talking with the head manager. So, freaked out, he walks up to him and he's like, how'd you get to the lobby so quick? The projectionist then explained to him that he had just walked in the building and was actually asking the manager something about the movie schedule that day. And at that point, he hadn't even been upstairs, and he was the only other person. Him and the manager were the only 2 people in the building with codes to get upstairs. So there's no one else that could have been up there. So that employee explained to the manager and the projectionist that somebody was up there, and he just waved at him. They did a full sweep of upstairs. They sent, a handful of employees that had gotten there and checked the cameras, and they never saw any evidence that somebody was up there, but he waved at somebody. Again, it impacted him enough that he is now a preacher because he believes that it was something dark, something demonic. And another story from up in the projection area is from one of my good friends. He doesn't like ghost stuff. He doesn't like ghost movies. He doesn't like anything spooky. He won't even watch The Nightmare Before Christmas because he just doesn't vibe with any of it. So I don't think he made any of this up. But I might be a little too trusting. So this was when movie theaters still had film, or at least our theater still had film. I think it had film a little bit longer than industry standard because, it's a small town. But this was when it still had film. He was in the back edge of the projection area, splicing the film together, and he heard footsteps and saw out of the corner of his eye the same projectionist I just talked about. Um, so he thought the projectionist was up there talking to him, but what was actually up there was something that probably wasn't even human. So my friend began to rant to the projectionist about some football game. I think they went to rival colleges. So, he's basically making fun of him, going on a prolonged rant about football. And in the middle of it, he hears his name being called over the walkie talkies. So he responds back and asks what they want. And when the person comes back over the radio, they're asking him what he wants to eat. He realizes that it's the other projectionist. So he turns to who he thought was the projectionist up there with him. And he was in the middle of asking, why did you use the walkie talkie if you're up here? But before he can finish his sentence, he realizes the person standing there with him is someone that he's never seen before in his life. So my buddy has a really hot temper. So he kind of just gets upset immediately. And he said he stepped up to the guy and basically yelled, "Who the hell are you?" And when he takes another step, the person doesn't move his legs, but somehow glides backward. And he hears like a weird, dark laugh. And the guy just disappears before his eyes. Now, I've known this guy for a while. He's said this story pretty consistently. When he does tell it, he always seems uncomfortable when he tells it. I want to believe him because I don't think he has any reason to lie about it. But when I talked to him about this for the very last time, I was like, "Have you done any research into that? Have you looked up anything? What do you think that was?" And he said it could be a tulpa. Are you familiar with that?
No, I think I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
So from what he said and me looking up a few things, a tulpa is basically a thought form entity. It's something that's manifested by the collective thought of people. So I from his research, he believes that all these people going in the movies, I don't know if there's a scary movie on at the time that this happened or what, but like their collective thoughts of being afraid of something, be it a ghost or whatever, could have manifested this entity up there that he ran into. Which that explanation is as good as any of them. I've looked up a few things about tulpa. There's actually a university that did an experiment trying to manifest a tulpa, and they got some results. I cannot remember the name of the experience or experiment. And then there's on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a bunch of people on I can't talk, man. I'm so sorry. There's a bunch
Oh,
of people
good.
on 4chan who tried to manifest like anime girls to be their girlfriends. There's a whole spectrum on people trying to be tulpamancers, but he believes that this is what that was.
Hmm.
Um, but if you have time for it, I have one more spooky story if
Yeah,
you'd like it.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this very last story from the movie theater, um, it comes from people who are part of the cleaning crew. They're the people that came in after everything was done. They came in at like 2 or 3 a.m. and worked until 6 a.m. and they just deep cleaned the theaters. So weird things would happen to them during the witching hour, which, if you're familiar with folklore, is 3 a.m. That's when all the demons and ghosts and other things are supposed to be more active according to lore. And one common thing that these guys would report, almost every single one of them had some experience with what they called the brick man. Um, like clockwork, almost every night when they're taking out the trash carts to the dumpster, they would see a shadow figure step out of the brick wall that was between the back door and the dumpster. Now, the way they describe this, the best way I can describe it is it's like the Patterson Gimlin footage of Bigfoot, where he's taking
Mm-hmm.
that big step,
Yeah.
just takes a large step out of the wall, and they said it would hold its position for a few seconds and then just recede back into the wall. So all of these people would see this thing back there. Um, and if, if you went out there with the intention of seeing it, like if you went out, your sole purpose was to see this thing, you wouldn't see it. Um, I don't know what the deal is for for that, but they would see this thing pretty regularly. And then the other good story from the cleaning crew almost led to a missing persons report being filed. So, for reference, behind this theater is our local arena. It's our theater's at the base of what's essentially a mountain, and at the top of the mountain's the arena. So, this was in the late 2000s, maybe early 2010s. When they were doing a bunch of renovations there, they had some spotlights. So, one of the people on the cleaning crew was out back. He was taking out trash when suddenly he's hit by this super bright light in the sky. As his eyes kind of adjusted to what he was seeing, he basically sees this giant UFO. He said that there was a low hum in the air. There was a bunch of different lights, but he sees some sort of flying object in the sky. Um, if I remember correctly, it's a triangle shaped craft, and I'll get into something about it in a second. But he sees this UFO and he watches it fly around for a second, and then it just blinks out of existence. So he throws away the trash and runs back in to tell the story of the UFO that he had just seen. He's like, runs in and he's about to tell everybody to come outside. But as he walks in, he realizes that it's a really tense mood, and everyone's grouped together in the middle of the lobby. So they see him and they all kind of relax, and he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO, and they're basically like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I was outside. I was outside for 3 or 4 minutes, and there's a UFO, and it was flying around." And they all basically got silent and told him that he hadn't been there for a few hours, that they had looked outside, they've checked in the parking lot, they checked in other theaters. The only reason they hadn't called the cops yet to report him missing is because his car was still in the parking lot. So they were gathered in the lobby to figure out what they should do. Um, the only reason I know this story, the person who was on the cleaning crew is really successful now. He went and got very expensive degrees, and I don't know if I should say too much about what he does, but it's in the legal profession. I don't want to like dox him or anything, but when he was in college, he was part of a ghost hunting crew that went to Bobby Mackey's and they filmed some stuff. And when he was part of that crew, he decided, I'm going to get a tattoo of that thing I saw. So he has a big tattoo of the triangle shaped UFO on his forearm that he had saw that night. Which, if you were making that story up, I don't see why you'd get a tattoo.
Yeah, that does make a whole lot of sense.
But yeah, those are my spooky stories. I'm sorry if I rambled too
No,
much and
no,
stuttered too much, but
no. I enjoyed it. Sure, the audience enjoys it too. We definitely like to listen to some spooky stuff around here. I
yeah,
did have
man.
a I did have a couple questions though.
Okay.
Um, the one thing that I was thinking about with this movie theater, how high up? You said it like 40 stairs or something. Was that like the upper? Was it one of those like old school movie theaters, like it used to be, like where it could have been haunted, obviously for years?
So this movie theater was made after the year 2000.
Oh, okay, so it's not that old.
It was our old town theater closed because this was built. It's not old. There was nothing on that property beforehand. It was actually kind of swampland before that. The only property records at all, because there's a very large. It's close to the Daniel Boone State Park, so Cumberland Falls and all these other large nature attractions are there. So there was apparently some records of like a cabin being there at one point or being close to there, but other than that, there was nothing there until the theater was built. So there's no real history of it being haunted. It's not old enough to have ghosts, and there's nothing there beforehand. But the projection area was just ridiculously tall because we had two very large theaters in there, and then everything else was pretty small. But we just had two that were massive for the area because we serviced 3 counties.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I was thinking about was kind of goes back to your original story, like with your grandmother and everything. How old was she at that
My
time?
my grandmother who passed away,
Yeah, your great grandmother, great great grandmother.
I believe she was like 45, 46.
Okay. Yeah. And when you were in the house, I remember you said it was your grandma. Which one was that when you were a baby? That's the
So
same.
when I was a baby
Yeah.
in the house, the woman who was dying was my grandma.
Okay, you're normal. Okay.
The other woman who was there was my great grandma, who it was the daughter-in-law of my great great grandma, who was the Blackfoot Native American woman.
Okay.
So there's
That's
like
where
4 generations of people who had kids way too early in the same house.
yeah, you'd mentioned your grandma and everything else, and I was trying to think of remember. I was like, so was it his grandma that had passed away, or his great grandma? I just wanted some clarification. It's all good,
That's fine.
but no, I appreciate you coming out and talking with me. It's been fun.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate you letting me on here. I'm still doing a deep dive into your book, and I'm enjoying it. And you're doing great work. I hope you keep posting regularly, and I hope someday, may it be at a paranormal conference or something like that, I can get you to autograph a copy of that once it comes in.
Well, I guess I can go ahead and throw this out here. I will be doing something in my neck of the woods, I believe. Let me check on the date before I say something that's wrong. It is October 21st. It will be at the 4-H Fairgrounds called Para Unity. I think it's Para Unity 5, but it's a paranormal convention up here in North Central Indiana. You can find that on Facebook, but I went ahead and reserved it today. I was there last year, but the podcast had just started last year. We're a little bit bigger than we were last year when I started. So, but you want to make like a 3-hour trip. I'll
Hey,
be
I'm
up.
already gonna make another 3-hour trip, I think, on Halloween to go to Cumberland Con in Somerset, Somerset, Kentucky, because that's
Yeah,
where the International Paranormal Museum and Research Center is, and they're having
awesome.
their own little festival there. So I might as well hit them all. I'm
Yeah.
going to be trying to go to the new screening of a paranormal documentary here next month. So might as well just burn some rubber.
Yeah. This place, I went to it. They have like vendors and they have other podcasts. They have other speakers and guests and stuff like that and other paranormal research groups. So it's a pretty good time.
I
But no,
went to the first Frogman Fest this year.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that was very unorganized, but everyone there was so nice. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't get. A lot of paranormal conventions aren't just like crazy people wearing tinfoil hats, even though I think that would be great branding for you. Um, it's a lot of people that are passionate about what they do. The first Frogman Festival, it was excellent. There's a bunch of great guest speakers, and there was a lot of people like you who have podcasts who were there, and they were some of the most humble and nice people ever. And then I left, I looked up their podcast. I'm like, oh wow, you get 1 million listeners weekly on your podcast, and you just had a 45-minute conversation with me about a frog person. This is this is crazy.
I wish I got that many a week because then maybe I wouldn't have to pay to host the podcast. But
If I got that many a week, I'd quit my job and start doing just podcasting, and I'd sell feet pics on the side just because I could.
only feet.
Yeah,
Make an only
I'll
feet page.
I'll shave one leg and I'll leave the other one hairy, and I'll get two different audiences in there.
Definitely. No, I joke around or whatever. Everyone they ask me what the name means sometimes, and basically, when my first thought process of coming up with a name, I don't know why, but I always thought about people that listen to this type of stuff or that are into the type of this stuff. They call them tinfoil hat wearers or whatever. Like, because I dabble in with conspiracies and aliens and all sorts of stuff. So I was like, well, most people, the average person, is going to look at someone like, oh, you're one of those tinfoil hat people. I was like, well, I'm getting stories from people that were considered the tinfoil hat people. So just Tinfoil Tales made sense to me.
I mean, I liked it. I like the naming for that. There's another podcast I've been a fan of for a while, and their name's Crackpot because they were called crackpots when they would talk about this stuff. So at least you all had good ideas when you're naming yours. I called mine The Other Side because it's talking about spooky things.
Mm-hmm.
Yours
I,
has reason to it.
I think there's another podcast, and I'm not sure. I think it's under the tinfoil cap or hat or something like that. I don't know. I named my stuff. I didn't do a whole lot of research on podcasts, to be honest, because I do music stuff as well. I had the recording stuff, and I wasn't doing anything. I was like, instead of having all this stuff, I may as well use it because I've got thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So that's what kind of got me doing this. Like I've always talked about things and stuff like that. I was like, well, maybe I'll find people that want to talk about things since all those years where I encountered my stuff and I never felt like I could talk about it. So I figured give a platform to people that kind of felt like I did, where they'd think you're a whack job, any normal, if you're out there telling a random person about it. So here's
Yeah,
the
man.
here's the safe space. Come tell me your stories, and I'm not going to sit there and think you're a crackpot or something.
Everyone just wants a chance to share their story. I mean, I told this to you before we were recording, but I've had people who I work with at my job come up and tell me how they were related and had their story investigated by Project Blue Book, and they've never told anyone until that point because they didn't want people to think they're crazy. There's plenty of people who have stories, and there's not enough excellent platforms like Tinfoil Tales where they can come in and be comfortable and share these experiences. And I think the fact that there's not more of these safe spaces, and it's not as mainstream to talk about it, is just harming the community as a whole. If more people could come out and tell their stories, the same way that you said that you shared a story at one point, and then on a different podcast, and people started flooding your mentions with, hey, I saw something similar. There's probably people all across the country seeing similar stuff, but they think they're crazy and they're the only ones seeing it, and they feel left out or like they're losing it.
Yeah.
Kentucky, where I'm from, there's people on one side of the state that call little creatures that come out of caves hobknockers, and on the other side of the state, you have the Kentucky goblins, and then you have the mountain folk and all kinds of stuff.
So
They're all seeing the same creature, but they don't communicate.
I do have a little bit of an episode. I was talking about Bigfoot, but the thing that the guy was describing to me was a Kentucky goblin. He said it looked like Gollum from the Lord of the Rings, and he lives down in southern Indiana, Kentucky border area. I said, to me, it sounds like a Kentucky goblin. And I thought it was funny because on my wall, which I got this at this paranormal convention a couple of years ago, I know the guy that does the artwork, but he draws photos of cryptids, like really good artwork stuff, almost like posters and stuff like that. I bought the one for the Kentucky goblins actually hanging up on my bedroom wall.
Well, as you say that, directly in front of my desk is a framed poster that I bought from a paranormal convention from a guy who draws cryptids, and it's of the Kentucky goblins.
It
Is
may have been
it
this, his name's
is
Easton.
does he wear a top hat, like a bowler hat?
Is he a
Like,
taller guy?
yeah.
It's probably the same guy. I'll send you a picture here in a minute of what mine looks like, see if it's the same one.
If it is, I'm gonna just vomit from the synchronicity.
Yes. No, he does go to those. I think he actually was at the Frogman convention, if that's where you went to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, hang on. I have his business card. Hang on. Let's see. Does it have his name on here? This says Sherwin Sketch. There's
No,
not a first name.
no, I don't think that's what he does. Um,
Who? I was excited. See, every time I talk about Kentucky goblins or anything related to, Hellier, which I feel like I have a personal connection to through me and my wife. If you've watched Hellier, they go to Hellier, Kentucky to look for goblins. They go to
mhm.
Somerset, Kentucky to look for goblins. Well, my family, they moved. They were in Harlan when they first moved to Kentucky. They moved to Elkhorn City, which is the city right next to Hellier. And then my wife is from Somerset, where they apparently have little green men in caves, and there's all these cult rituals involving them. And one of the things that happened before me and my wife even watched Hellier, did a deep dive in this high strangeness, was a lot of people went missing in her town, and they found their bodies in front of the random caves that are there. So we started to look up stuff about caves, and I went to visit her. It was while we were still dating, and on her mom's kitchen table was a giant news article about paranormal investigators and coming to Somerset to film documentary series. And it was, I guess that it was them there to promote Hellier or something like that. But that we saw that, and we watched both seasons back to back in like 2 days. And we're
That's
like,
what I
that's
did.
that's the caves. That's what we were talking about, and all this other stuff. And I always grew up with my grandpa telling me stories about like little hairless kids that would run around the mountains of Harlan that they'd see, and they never knew who their parents were, and they'd just come out and be naked and disappear. I don't know. There's a lot of weird connections to it.
There's actually, and I'm sure I'll get corrected by someone for saying this wrong, but I know there was a story that happened in the 1960s, I believe, and it was somewhere in Kentucky. And this family were shooting at what they thought were aliens because there were these little bald green colored men that were like 3 foot tall or whatever coming up and like attacking the house and the whole family shooting. And they went and got the police, and the police came up there and found all the casings all over the place. And they could see that they were shooting up the place. There was damage done all over the place. They never found any evidence. And I'm pretty sure it's like a Project Blue Book thing.
Yeah, that was the Hopkinsville Goblins.
Yeah.
That was the Sutton family.
Yeah.
Which Geraldine Sutton, she goes to a lot of the conventions as well, and she's the only surviving member of that family that even acknowledges that story, because the rest of them were basically told since they were kids to not talk about it, that everyone thinks they're crazy.
Yeah.
But
No, the whole Hellier thing, the Kentucky Goblin thing, and then just interviewing that guy. And then he was talking about he's a Bigfoot hunter, but then he was talking about seeing something when they were walking up by a cemetery or whatever. He said it looked like a golem. It's like one, I think I don't remember if it was just one or two. It's been almost a year ago that I did that interview. But I just thought, I was like, that to me sounds like a Kentucky goblin, not a nothing Squatch related.
yeah, well, I can never remember the name. I think the Reddit username is KY Jackie. She posted it on a subreddit. I think it was The Truth Is Out There. I'll send you the story. This woman is out hiking at Red River Gorge, which is in the middle of Kentucky, and weird stuff is happening around her. Like, she hears somebody walking, they don't know who it is. It's their night hiking to get to a clearing so they can see the stars, and suddenly this woman appears. They're 10 miles deep in the woods with flashlights, hiking gear. This woman appears in a sundress and flip flops, and a flashlight, no water, no other gear, looks at them and like is kind of, acting weird and just disappears. They go farther in the woods and they see this gray creature. If you're into like creepy pastas, the way she basically described it was like the rake, which to me that's kind of a Kentucky goblin, just a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
She sees this creature under a tree and it's like staring at her and the two people she's hiking with. They're shining their flashlight at it, and then it starts running at them, and they sprint out of the woods and they leave the place. But the pictures that she drew of this thing, it looks like a Kentucky goblin, just large, according to her description. So there's, if you have a Bigfoot hunter on here saying he's seen Gollum in the woods, we see this woman on Reddit. She's sharing this post, the whole Hellier case. There's just crazy legends about Kentucky and these gray skinned people or creatures in the mountains. I want to know what it is.
Yeah. I think even the Dover demon
Oh yeah.
is the same type, like the rake, the Dover demon. There's all sorts of things that all seem to come back into this whole Kentucky goblin thing. And not to keep rambling on all night, but my brain's firing off. I think a
Oh,
lot
you're
of it has
good.
I think a lot of it has to do with the cave systems down there in the mountains. Like we don't really know what's in these caves. We don't know what lives in there. It could be anything. And they have all
Yeah.
sorts of caves, and that's why people see them in all those areas for the most part, because they all have all these tunnels and systems that they can navigate through. You're out in the middle of the wilderness. I don't know. It seems plausible to me as there could be something that we don't know about. A lot of people
Yeah.
want to write it off as folklore. I mean, it's possible too, but a lot of people see a lot of things that are very similar, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say that everyone's crazy but seeing this whole exact same thing.
Yeah, especially in Kentucky. Well, one thing I've learned, um, there's caves in places that you don't even expect caves to be. My wife, where she grew up in Somerset, almost directly across the street from her. I mean, granted, there's a field, but the next road from her was a Civil War hospital, and it's still standing. It's a tourist attraction. You can go to it now, and 50, 100 feet from there, there's some holes in the ground that connect to a cave system really close to my hometown. My homeroom teacher in high school was the ROTC instructor. So he'd take us rock climbing and a few other things if we were part of his club. We would go. He parked the bus on the side of an interstate. We walked a half a mile into the woods. There's a giant walk or rock wall that we climbed. And then we went down into this cave with flashlights and explored. And he said that somebody that he knew, some like actual geologist, had done enough research and scouting of that cave that they were almost certain it connected to the Mammoth Cave system, which just goes across Kentucky, all through Appalachia and everything. So they're all connected or
Mm.
could be connected by this cave system. Everyone's seeing something similar. And if you want to go all the way back to when some of these sightings started, the Kentucky Goblins case, where that craft crashed, there's a abandoned mine on the property that could have led, or an abandoned cave, I think, on that property, on the Sutton family property, that could possibly be part of that same system. So are they seeing aliens? Are they seeing something that's here? I don't know. But the one thing I do know about folklore is it's all based on something. Even if it's been diluted and changed over the years, a lot of people experienced something, and they're either trying to warn you about it, they're trying to tell you about it, keep you informed. There's some sort of fact that backs up almost all of folklore if you go far enough back.
Yeah. I think for every story, there's some sort of truth behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my tangent for the night.
Hey, that's fine. That was a great tangent. Any time that we can get people to realize that a lot of these things are more connected than they think, and make them do some more research, the closer we get to finding some sort of truth.
Yep. Goes back to what you're doing with the kids at school, actually opens their minds up to the possibilities of the unknown. So,
Yeah, man.
again, I appreciate that. I appreciate anyone out there that dedicates their time and life to helping kids out. Being a family guy myself, it's pretty close. I wish my kids were more interested in some of the stuff I am, but they're not.
Yeah, I hope my kids are interested when I have them, but I also know that my kids are probably going to be weird and will need some sort of saving grace. So maybe my kids talking about ghosts won't be the best thing for them. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yep. Well, John, I do appreciate it. And anyone out there listening, if you want to be on Tinfoil Tales, you can send me an email at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com and we can get you scheduled. You can find it on Facebook. It's obviously an easy way to get a hold of me. But yeah, and I guess I'll plug the Para Unity convention again. It's October 21st. It's in Miami County in Indiana. I will be there along with some other podcasts and some other paranormal groups. So anyone out there listening, if you want to attend, make a trip up, come say hello. But John, appreciate talking with you. It's been great.
Hey, it's been excellent being here. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. So thank you so much for this experience.
Yep, not a problem. Have a good one.
You too.